Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm Jose.
And Merry Christmas.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Another Spider-Man movie. It's interesting, it takes what's been happening with universes over the last sort of 10 years and kind of inverts it. What's been happening with Marvel and universes is taking all of these characters and fitting them together into the same world. And what this does is take one character, Spider-Man, and split him into 5 or 6 different versions that interact. So it says that there's lots of different universes.
Yes.
And in this film they come together. And it's animated it's 3D, but it's got a real 2D hand-drawn, hand-animated feel to it. It's very interesting animation and drawing.
I mean, it's not just that. It's almost like different periods in the film will have a different style of animation, which makes the film visually very, very interesting, actually.
Yeah. I was expecting a little bit more of that, actually. It's mainly when other characters sort of come in, which mainly happens later on in the film. Because you've mostly got your main character, which is Miles Morales, who's, I think, a character that only originated in the last 10 years or so in the comics.
Right.
Who's this mixed race kid from New York. He's his dad's African American, his mum's I think Puerto Rican, and he is also a version of Spider-Man. And in this, he starts off. There is Spider-Man. Spider-Man is Peter Parker, who lives in his world. He happens to also then get bit by a radioactive spider.
Yes.
Stuff happens. Peter Parker dies right at the beginning, and through one reason or another, one mechanism or another, Morales is thrown into a world where lots of other versions of Spider-Man, including a different universe's Peter Parker, who's in his 40s, enter his universe. And then they have to try and get home. He has to learn to be Spider-Man and blah, blah, blah.
Yes. It's very interesting. I mean, I thought all of that was very interesting. So the first thing that caught my eye is that in this animated Spider-Man, basically what it does is a recap of all the most spectacular scenes of all the other Spider-Man movies, right?
Well, really the Raimi ones, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
they seem to be kind of canon in a way.
Yes. I mean, I couldn't pinpoint them, but, I knew I'd seen them before. And so what it does is it kind of basically recaps them in an animated version, yeah? So they're all kind of cartoon recaps of...
Yeah, so it's got him famously from Spider-Man 2... stopping the train at the front, and he's got a web coming out of his wrist at the buildings at the side to stop it. That's one of the most famous sort of things. I think the reason that it's those 3 films in particular that it recaps or uses to establish Spider-Man is that this isn't a Marvel production. It's one of those that Sony, because they still own Spider-Man, in association with Marvel.
Yeah.
So because those Spider-Man films were Sony only. I think it's
so there's a rights issue involved.
Something like that. It's just their version.
Well, all of that was very, very interesting, and actually, kind of, the wit of giving, the origin story, for each of the characters that you see, and then kind of being playful with it and kind of speeding it all up, and kind of the film has an interesting kind of narrative structure where, as each new Spider-Man is introduced, the style of animation changes. But actually, kind of the structure of this recap becomes kind of like a bit of an in-joke throughout. I liked all of that very much.
All the recaps start off with looking at a comic book, and it says this version of Spider-Man, Noir Spider-Man or Spider-Pig or whatever, Spider-Ham.
Yes.
And they say something like, let's do this again, or for the last time, let's tell the story. And then they tell their origin story.
Yes.
And there's a great joke a little bit later on where, spoilers, I guess, when Miles discovers that one of the enemies he's facing is actually his uncle working for Kingpin. And he tells the other Spider people this. The Noir Spider-Man says that's a hell of an origin story.
Yes.
So the film has a very it has a real sort of self-aware streak. I mean, it would be impossible for it not to. And also it's co-written by Phil Lord of Lord and Miller, who and it's produced by them as well, who made 21 Jump Street and Lego Movie and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. They have an incredibly witty sort of sensibility, and they bring it to their direction and their script. So this wasn't directed by them. This was directed by Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman from a script by Lord and Rothman.
Yeah.
So huge kind of team effort.
Yes.
But you can feel their sort of sensibility all over it in the timing and the type of wit.
Yes. I thought there was a problem for me with some of the pacing.
Yeah, it was intermittently boring.
Yes.
I thought.
Yes, which is an odd thing to say because, there's so much about it that I liked and I thought it was so kind of visually exciting. Actually, I thought it was so visually exciting that in a paradoxical way, I wanted to see it on a DVD.
So you can pause it.
Yeah, which I almost never feel. Like, I'm a movie person. I really prefer seeing everything in the cinema and so on. But, this was... I don't know why... And it's something to think about. Why was this a type of film where I thought I might have had a more enriching experience watching it on a DVD? Part of it is because the animation is so great and it's so interesting and so visual, and it's almost like you want to linger over some of those compositions, right? Because, the film really does make use of the comic book form.
Oh, yeah.
So, there's lots of panels, and the film uses panels, and it uses comic books and so on. And actually, you want to pause over those panels, like some of the drawings of the Kingpin, taking up like 3/4 of a frame of one panel. They do seem like just dazzling visually. But of course, then, it's a movie, so it moves very fast.
Yeah, it moves incredibly fast. But also, it's not just panels. I mean, it does use a quite in-your-face comic book aesthetic, like you said. Like, there are points where it uses kind of speech bubbles and narrative bubbles and that sort of thing. Yes. But a lot of the time, it's just things like... It's just the compositions.
Yes.
Like, particularly the shot where Miles returns to the scene of where he was bitten by the spider, realising there's something wrong with him or something different about him, and he looks for the spider, and it's lying there on its back on the ground, it's dead, and its legs are curled up, and you see this shot that's basically ground level, looking up through the spider's legs at Miles. And so the spider's legs are huge, and they completely frame him, and it feels like a comic book panel, Yeah. It's stylish, and expressive. I mean, that shot's almost like... That's like Nosferatu or something with the things coming in at him,
No, there's great visual things.
So there's real kind of visual sort of neatness as well. Kind of, there are times when things kind of get cluttered, but actually the clutter is important. That's when the kind of multiverse intrudes on the quote-unquote real world, Miles' universe. So like when the multiverse... There's like a science experiment, and when it kind of goes off, and multiverse things start happening, then buildings and lampposts and trees start shifting, and that's when they shift into these different drawing styles, different animation styles, and then they end up coming out like these bizarre art pieces. Like, there's a character who says, "I think it's a Banksy."
Yes.
Weird things stuck in the middle of town, and they're angular and jagged and weird, and they don't match everything else.
No,
and it's the clash of styles of animation that emphasizes that.
Yes. I mean, that is a trope in comic books, right? Because, they would often do, like, these alternate reality stories, and every once in a while they'd bring all of these kind of, alternate universes together in some kind of explosive form. So in a way, kind of, the narrative in itself is not in any way innovative. It's been done kind of, many, many times before in comic books. What I thought made it interesting here is that it's done through all of these different styles of animation. So, there's... I forget what her name was, but like manga... Peppa Spider or something.
Penny Parker.
Yeah. Yeah, she was done in a manga style, kind of very tweeny and, kind of cutesy and so on.
Yeah, so kawaii.
And then, of course, there was, like, film noir Spider, and that was all, like a...
Black and white.
Yeah.
He's really taken by a Rubik's Cube, because it doesn't know what colours are. Yeah.
I mean, all of that was very,
And there are elements of that, and then there's Spider-Ham as well, who comes from a Looney Tunes universe.
Yes.
But those are the three characters that really emphasise the difference in style, whereas the other ones, Miles, old Peter, if you like, and Gwen Stacy... They inhabit the same universe visually.
I'm not... Yes and no. So I think, for example, the Gwen Stacy, when she's on her own, I think the colors are different. I think the style of animation is softer, whereas Miles is kind of drawn in a little bit of a wonky manner. He's kind of much more angular than Gwen Stacy
I guess. He's animated a little bit more kind of jerky.
Yeah, so I think there are differences.
Yeah, but they're much more slight. I think the film sets up a certain hierarchy of kind of normalness.
Yes, it does.
Miles and old Peter and Gwen, by and large, inhabit a more normal, sort of human version. And then when you get into noir and anime and Looney Tunes, they are played for laughs largely. They're not that important to the story, and they bring in a lot of kind of visual excitement, but they are less important, and that's reflected in. It's not reflected, but it's a combination of their visual styles, and that, like, you can't imagine. Imagine if they made a movie like this where Spider-Ham was the main character. You kind of can't. You know what I mean? And then, like,
oink.
You know what I mean?
No, but listen, what I'm trying to say, and I agree with you, right? There is a hierarchy. The differences between Peter Parker, Gwen Stacy, and Miles are slighter, but it's a credit to the amount of thought and visual imagination of the film that even within that, they're each drawn in a slightly different manner.
Yeah.
And actually the same goes for the Kingpin, right? Like, kind of the visualization of the Kingpin is done in a very different manner to Gwen Stacy, right? Even a different color palette and so on. So
the Kingpin is very much of a kind of like a TV cartoon, I think, like a Western TV cartoon version where it's very big and wide, and I mean it's the first shot of him I really laughed at because there's this tiny head in the middle of these vast wide shoulders, but it's huge and blocky, and there's something almost like Batman-y about that.
There is. It's a very interesting style of animation.
But again, you're right. Like it does. It's not quite the same, but it does cohere really nicely.
Really nicely.
And it's to the film's credit that it actually makes it work so well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I suppose my question is, with all of those things that I like so much about it, and actually we must mention, like, the voicing is really an all-star cast, right?
Do you want me to go through the cast?
Yeah.
Okay, so Miles, your main character is Shameik Moore. I don't know him.
I don't know him.
Peter Parker is Jake Johnson.
I don't know him either. Let's just go through the ones that made an impression. So,
Prowler, the uncle, is Mahershala Ali.
Yes.
Jefferson Davis, the dad, is Brian Tyree Henry.
Yes,
You've got a right crush on these days.
Well, on both of them, actually. But Brian Tyree Henry, I just think, to me, he's the actor that's made the biggest impression this year on me, really.
Mm. I didn't recognise him, so he felt kind of anonymous to me in this.
Oh, well.
He could have been someone else. Which is, I mean, that's not the worst thing. It's just, he's not the most important character, but I just didn't think, like, there was a...
Well, to be fair, the thing about Brian Tyree Henry, it's not his voice that's the most distinctive thing about him.
No, that's true.
Whereas actually Nicolas Cage has a very, very distinctive voice.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage plays noir Spider-Man.
Yes, and he's wonderful.
Lovely. John Mulaney plays Peter Porker.
Yes.
Spider-Ham.
And Liev Schreiber is the Kingpin.
Yes.
And Lily Tomlin is Aunt May.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And Aunt May gets this really kind of radically different role to that you've seen in... Well, I'm not a comic book geek, so this may be something that is in the comic books or something, but in terms of movies, Aunt May is always...
I've never seen it.
Aunt May's always supposed to be oblivious, and, it's a secret that from her that Peter is Spider-Man, but then in this one she is like on top of everything.
Yeah.
And she's making gadgets, and she's in charge, and she's a badass.
You know whom I also loved, and I used to be a big comic book geek, but I haven't followed Spider-Man for 20, 30 years actually. So what surprised me, and maybe it's standard, but it surprised me, was to see Doc Ock as a woman.
Yeah, I didn't expect... something said Doc Ock to me in a way, because there is something in every version of Spider-Man that I've seen somewhere or other. There always seems to be someone interning at a scientist's lab, and the scientist will either be Dr. Octopus or Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. So, like, I was expecting one of them to turn up once a science experiment became part of the story.
Yeah.
But obviously, as she's a woman, that's the part I wasn't expecting.
Yes. And she was really beautifully visualized. Like, the whole movement of her with the arms and the kind of arms she was given. It's beautiful design, and actually it's beautifully animated as well.
Catherine Hahn It does the voice. I don't know who she is either.
No, I don't either.
So I mean, when you say it's an all-star cast, there are stars, but there's also plenty of people that we haven't heard of who, just stood alongside and stuff.
Sure.
And I mean, everyone is well voiced. Everyone's well cast.
Yes.
But I think to go back to what you were saying about, if I like all this, then why did I find bits of it boring? And I had a thought that goes back to something else you said, which is that I think there's something. You said, I might have had a better time watching this on DVD, and I think there's something televisual about it.
Yes.
Or if not televisual, then like it's like a made-for-TV movie. Like they've done lots of. I've only seen one of them actually, a Batman one, I think, a Joker one, and they're very good. These kind of straight to DVD 2D animations.
They're surprisingly good.
They're really good, but they are different. You couldn't. They wouldn't be the same in the cinema.
Yes.
And this seemed to inhabit that world in a way.
Yes.
Like it is visually spectacular. There's no taking away from that. It's an incredible achievement visually. It's beautiful to look at. It's kaleidoscopic and interesting and complex and careful and beautifully composed. But there is something, I think it might be in the plot, that everyone is, because it's fitting in all these versions, there's something very thin about everything.
I think that's the thing. I think there is something very thin about everything. There's something very sentimental about that thinness. And also it doesn't touch you emotionally. Like, so to me those are like three problems actually. One, a kind of a lack of complexity, the over sentimentality, which I think is slightly cheap. Actually, it cheapens the whole thing. And then the fact that it didn't touch me emotionally. I didn't engage with it emotionally on any level, really.
I feel similar. What did touch me was, again, it's something we touched on, I suppose, recently, and kind of in the podcast on Call Me By Your Name way back when, and also on Disobedience, the idea of being separate from someone who'll have a place in your heart forever. Because there's this idea that these guys have to get back to their universes, or they're going to die. They're going to disintegrate in his.
Yes.
And when they do manage to get them back, the experience with them has changed him as a person. Miles, has changed Miles completely. But he'll never ever be able to see these people, communicate with them again. They're completely separate in their separate universes. And there's the friendship that he develops with Gwen. Again, it is light, and the film is doing so many other things that it doesn't have an awful lot of time to devote to it. But it has enough time to devote to it that when you see him on his phone, you see her on her phone at the end looking at pictures that they took when they were together. That I find that quite tender.
Yes.
Right at the end. But I think what you're more referring to is probably the Stan Lee sentimentalization.
I am.
As he's passed away. This is the first kind of Marvel thing, I think, since he passed away.
Yes, but also, the message of the film, that anyone can wear the mask, and you just go,
it overdoes it.
Throw up.
I think that's a Stan Lee thing, because that was definitely something that Stan Lee loved to talk about with Spider-Man. Because with other superheroes, you could see bits of their face. Basically, like Batman, the cowl, it revealed his face, whatever. You could always see, and Spider-Man was one where every part of him was covered, and so you really could imagine yourself as him somehow. And he loved to talk about that in interviews and stuff. And I wonder whether, had he not died before this film came out, the film wouldn't have really pushed that as hard.
No,
I think that was his very vocal message.
No, but I think it would have pushed it that hard, because you are confronted by 5 or 6 Spider-Mans, right? So this idea that anybody can wear, that different people wear the mask, and therefore that anyone can wear the mask, it seems like there is a logic to it, but it's just, the banality of it is what got me.
Yeah, I suppose. No, I suppose that's right. And also the I mean, this is something that was on my mind as well. Before even it started to come up in the film, I thought that there's going to be something about this, the idea of anyone being able to wear the mask. And I think the fact that the film does set up a hierarchy of who's more serious a Spider-Man than other ones, slightly does a disservice to that. Which is to say, like, you can more easily imagine yourself probably as Miles or Peter or Gwen than you can as the pig.
Yes.
So there's a certain degree of equality. Like there was obviously this thing of everyone has their talents and everyone has their version of what Spider-Man, Spider-Person means in their universe and what makes them useful and interesting. But there is a certain inequality to how it works. Like I say, like the pig and the anime girl and the noir guy are more or less brushed off. They are there for a bit of relief and to make the world a little bit more interesting and more vibrant and make the story and make it a little bit richer. I mean, if it were just Gwen, Peter, and Miles, it wouldn't have nearly the same level of interest or excitement. You know? Those guys bring a lot of colour to it.
Yes. And let's bring up the thing about color, because I don't think, I almost forgot, to be honest, which is to the film's credit, but I think it is significant that, this young new Spider-Man is a black Spider-Man. Which I'm sure there probably have been, in the comic book in the past, black people wearing wearing the mask, so to speak.
I'm not so sure that there have been. I think it was a big deal when Miles Morales was introduced.
Okay.
I think.
No. So if Mike Morales was introduced 10 years ago, then actually, it's been going on for a while. So I just think it was kind of, to me, very interesting to see Spider-Man in a movie be a black Spider-Man.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Actually, 7 years ago, August 2011,
right?
He first showed up. I'm just trying to see if there are. I mean, there was definitely news stories about it, and there was a whole thing when Donald Glover was in Community. He kind of informally petitioned to be the new Spider-Man when they were casting for a new one. And I think the idea was then like that would be the first black Spider-Man, because I don't think there was a precedent, and the idea was, why can't there be? I mean, he was drawing on the idea of anyone can wear the mask.
If anyone can wear the mask, why don't they? Yes.
And I think that is what ultimately led this kind of various pressures and just changes in society and what people wanted, led to Miles Morales.
Okay. Anyway, I think it's a significant thing, and just to go back, to this, this idea of mine, I suppose, but in a year where you have widows, and you have Black Panther, etc., 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 and Black Klansman, and so on, to have a black Spider-Man as well, it just feels like it feels quite something.
I've got here, although Morales is the first black Spider-Man, he marks the second time a Latino character has taken Spider-Man identity. Miguel O'Hara, who is half Mexican descent, was the title character in the 1990 series Spider-Man 2099.
Okay.
There you go.
So there you go.
And another thing I noticed, and it was only a minor thing, was how Miles' parents are in public service.
Yes.
Both of them. Obviously, his dad's a cop, and his mum, who you only see a little bit, has a paramedic's uniform on.
Yes.
And there is something. This is one of the things, I guess, that is very likeable about Spider-Man. Is the idea of him as a kind of regular person and someone who gives to society. And the whole thing about Spider-Man, I guess, is I'm a kid. So I've been given this power, this responsibility, but I'm a kid, and how do I balance that? But
not just a kid, always in a working class kid.
Right.
Or a lower middle class kid. I mean,
this is what I was getting to. Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea of class, and there was a Spider-Man video game that came out recently, which was a big deal on PlayStation. Again, Sony property, so it's a Sony game, and that had quite an interesting take where Spider-Man. What you normally get is an origin story as well. You normally get this is what the film kind of gently mocks is so many origin stories, and in the Spider-Man game, Spider-Man's like 26, 27 years old. So he's been Spider-Man for 8 or 9 years at this point. And there are people who know his identity. Mary Jane knows his identity. And so you're able to jump into a slightly different story with it. And one of the things in that is that he helps run a soup kitchen with Aunt May. And he's kind of working with the cops and stuff. But he has this great sense of social responsibility. And in the game, you're able to fly around New York, sort of swing around New York as freely as you like. And a lot of the little missions that you get are things like, I mean, there's one where it's like a homeless guy says, "I lost all my pigeons. Can you get my pigeons back?" Like things like that. There's an emphasis on Spider-Man kind of materially affecting very normal people's lives.
Well,
as opposed to always fighting the thing that is about to destroy the world.
What I remember of the comic books growing up was also him struggling to make ends meet.
Yeah.
So just kind of to pay the rent or to pay his university courses, or always being short of money, and kind of and therefore having to sell pictures to
To the Bugle.
The Bugle. So this sense of money being a worry and a concern, and kind of living in a precarious situation, right? Kind of, that's also part of what made it so appealing, really.
Yeah, and that is actually, that's a going back to the game, that's a big part of the game as well. You get that feeling all the time, and there's always something implicit. I feel it's I don't know how often it's ever been made explicit, but there is something. There's always seems to be something implicit that says, if he wanted, he could make loads of money.
Yes,
exactly. He could sell this for profit, clearly, somehow.
Or he could steal it, or whatever.
Oh,
He's got the power to do what he wants. So there's an active ethical choice at all times.
Yeah.
But let's wrap this up.
That's that great responsibility.
That's with a great power.
Great responsibility. Yeah.
So, kind of.
I'm not going as crazy about this film as a lot of people are. People are really taking to it, and you can see why. And there is something very nerdy about it. I mean, if you're someone who knows a lot more about Spider-Man than you or I do,
yes, then
it is going to reward you, because there are, especially in the end credits as well, like everything that the film kind of hasn't been able to bring in. It just spaffs out in the credits. There's a tour through so many Spider-Man references and versions in the credits.
Yes.
I recognised one or two.
Yes.
But I mean, there's so many that I won't have recognised that are there for you. So it obviously has like a real respect for its source material and its fans and the various things they might like, and I guess there's something interesting in the way that it's talked about its source material, and kind of talked about its own history. I think very often when you get a new version of Spider-Man or whatever hero it may be, you do tend to get a new origin story. I mean, Wolverine had about 8 in cinema, like one after the other, and they were all played by Hugh Jackman.
Yes.
Just constant Wolverine origin stories. And there's always some kind of implied knowledge or that sort of thing, kind of what you know and what you don't know, and so the way that a new version will take bits of what you know, reconfigure it. So in the Tom, is it Holland or Hollander? I forget which one he is. The new kid in the Marvel movies.
I can't remember. Either.
Yeah. Well, when he starts off, there's like they change things as kind of deep as he's got no Uncle Ben in that. Which I felt a little bit. I mean, again, I'm not the biggest fan, but I felt a little bit weirded out by that. Like, the thing about Uncle Ben dying and that's where he learns his lesson seems to be quite important. But it was a big change in the new Marvel lot. And what this film does is it's able to kind of take all that and say, like, this is what you know about Spider-Man. And so it says, you know this. Every time they do an origin story, they say, come on, you know this.
You know this, yeah.
And some of them you do, some of them I do. Like the thing about the very classic Peter Parker one, origin story, is well known. The noir one, and the one about the girl who befriends the spider in the robot. Yeah. I didn't know.
No, I didn't know that either.
But the idea that they're all introducing them with this is quite interesting. Like there's a way that it's conversing with its own history.
Yes.
That I think is kind of interesting, which I haven't quite thought through exactly, but is in there.
Yes. Well, I'd be interested in seeing it again on DVD and kind of having a more leisurely look at it. And I'm very glad we saw it, but I also don't think as highly of it as some of my other friends have been saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the last thing is, I think I've seen people have been making lists of their favourite Spider-Man versions, and it seems to come for everyone. Basically, go Spider-Man 2, this version of Spider-Man into the multiverse, into the Spider-Verse, and then various other ones. And for me, even Spider-Man 3, which I know everyone hates, sits above this. I think this. I still love the original Spider-Man trilogy, and I watched them a couple of months ago. I rewatched them, and I just thought, no, these are really good movies, and everyone needs to have a second look at them. And actually, if you're listening to this, you'd have to go back and watch Spider-Man 3 again, because there is really, really, really good stuff in that film that you've all forgotten, because all you remember is emo Spider-Man, which was, admittedly, very dumb. But there's so much other stuff. But, like, go back and look at the scene where Bruce Campbell plays the waiter in the restaurant. It's comic genius. So there you go.
Okay. On that note, we recommend it, but it might be good for you to go with lower expectations than have been recently built up on this movie. You'll enjoy it more.
Yeah, it's good fun.
It's good fun.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much for listening. We are Eavesdropping at the Movies, and we are
on iTunes and SoundCloud and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter at eavesdropmovies.com, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com, where you can see the full list of all the movies we've talked about.
Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.